The dream of retiring abroad. Warm weather, cheaper living, new adventures. It all sounds perfect on paper, doesn't it? And I get it. I've lived and worked overseas, and I can absolutely see the appeal, but it's not quite that straightforward. Now, I'm not saying don't do it, but after diving deep into the research, I'm going beyond the glossy brochure stuff to show you what you really need to think about before making the leap, and a best of both worlds alternative that might just surprise you. After spending 6 years in the UK and extended time living like a local in a non-English speaking country, the idea of retiring abroad has always appealed to me, so I completely understand the attraction. But once you look a little deeper, beyond the sunshine, tapas and cocktails, the reality can be very different. So think of this as me as waving the common sense flag, sharing the key things that often get overlooked, along with a more positive, low-risk way to test the dream before you risk everything. And I'm going to share with you what I call the Big Six, the key things that you really need to think about before packing up and moving abroad. We'll look at the stuff that often gets missed, from visas to tax traps, to healthcare, friendships, and what happens if the dream doesn't quite work out the way you'd hoped. And just before we get stuck in, guys, I'm not a financial advisor or an immigration specialist, so this should not be construed as advice, and you'll need to seek the services of an applicable specialist. Now, it's easy to assume that moving overseas is as simple as hopping on the plane and arranging a removal list. But despite what you might hear or perceive, every country has its own entry and residency rules. Take Thailand, for example. They offer a Thailand visa if you're over 50, but you'll need proof of income or savings and annual renewals. Bali requires sponsorship from a local agency and a retirement visa with specific criteria. Some European countries have what they call non-lucrative visas, which aren't quite as carefree as they sound, as they require proof of significant passive income or savings. And if you or your spouse happen to hold a foreign passport, that's not always a golden ticket either, for both of you for that matter. Having an EU passport, for example, doesn't mean you can just rock up and live anywhere in Europe. You still need to register for residency, you probably will need your own private healthcare, and in many cases pay local tax, which I'll touch on in a minute. These visas may sound very welcoming, but remember, when a country invites you to stay and perceives to roll out the red carpet for you, they also want a slice of your financial action. In other words, they naturally want something in it for them, so you well may become a tax resident of that country. This is a big one that often gets overlooked. Once you spend most of the year overseas, typically more than 183 days or 6 months, you could become a tax resident of that country, meaning your worldwide income becomes taxable there. In some countries like Spain, for example, you'll also need to declare your entire asset base to the local authorities. In using Australians as an example, this can be a rude shock. Here at home, superannuation is the name for our retirement fund. The income you draw down from it in retirement is tax-free. But abroad, a new country might treat that as taxable income, and this is once again the case in Spain. Yes, there are tax treaties, but they only work smoothly when the two countries' rules actually align. When I was working in the UK, I rented out my place in Australia. I paid Australian tax on my income, but then when I declared it in the UK, and because their rules were different, I ended up paying more tax in Britain due to the foreign income rules differing. Let's just say I wasn't thrilled. So before you make a big move, get advice from both sides, because you might not just be changing your scenery, you might be changing your entire tax world. Buying a place in the sun sounds idyllic, but do you actually own it? In some countries, foreigners can buy freely, like countries in Europe, for example. But in others like Asia and parts of the Caribbean, foreigners can't own land outright. You might only be allowed to lease it long-term or buy a property in a company's name. And inheritance rules, well, they can be completely different too. In many European and Latin countries, you can't simply leave your property to anyone you choose. A portion must go to your spouse or children under what's called the forced heirship. Add to that, if you die abroad, your estate might be processed under that country's legal system, not in your home countries. It's complex and something very few people consider when they first fall in love with that coastal villa. Here's the obvious one that becomes more important as we age: healthcare. In many countries, foreigners aren't automatically covered under the public system. You may need private health insurance, or you'll pay out of pocket for visits and medications. And on that note, even routine things like renewing prescriptions and finding an English-speaking doctor can be a challenge. And here's a tough question, but it's one worth asking. Where do you want to die? Look, if you think you'll be comfortable doing that in your adopted country, then fine. But who will actually be there for you when the time comes? What's your provision if you or your spouse are the first to pass away? The reality is most people end up returning home eventually, for medical reasons, the need to go into aged care, family, or just simply familiarity. But when you factor in this and some of the points I've previously raised, will you still have a home base? Living abroad means adapting, not just to a new place, but to a new way of life. And yes, that even applies in an English-speaking country. But think about the culture change when there's foreign language challenges. Are you really truly going to experience it fully if you don't speak the language? Factor in day-to-day things, banking, getting a haircut, visiting the doctor, even buying medication. They can all feel like many obstacles if language is a barrier. And look, this is just my view on it, but I wouldn't insult the local people by not making an effort to speak the language and expect that they speak my language in their country. Flip that the other way around in your home country if a foreigner doesn't speak English. And beyond the language, there's cultural difference that can also surprise you, from bureaucracy to social customs, and just feeling like you can fit in and be accepted. Whilst retiring abroad can be exciting, it can also be isolating. Your new friends might be fellow expats who move on a year or so after you've arrived. Your old friends, the ones back home, might visit once, maybe twice. So the question then becomes, what happens when the novelty wears off? Are you still living your dream, or have you simply relocated your old life to a new place? I'll touch on this next, but this is where the idea of testing retirement abroad starts to make real sense. For many people, the smartest move isn't to sell up and move. It's to test the waters first. Try renting somewhere for 3 or 6 months. That way you can live like a local rather than a tourist. Shop at the markets, use public transport, see a doctor, maybe even try opening a local bank account. Not only will this enable you to get to know how things actually work, but actually, assuming you want to, you'll actually be able to see how you assimilate to the local way of life. You'll quickly find out whether it's a dream lifestyle or just a long holiday. Some retirees even split their time part of the year abroad, part back home. That can be the perfect mix of adventure and security. It gives you flexibility if your health, taxes, finances or family situation change down the track, which they inevitably will. Now, I appreciate there's been a bit to take in there, guys, but there's no doubt retiring abroad can be an absolutely wonderful experience, a chance to start fresh, explore new cultures, and feel like you're eternally on holidays. But once you look past the romantic idea, it's the planning and preparation that make it work, and dealing with the reality once you're there so there's no regrets or nasty surprises down the track. And if you're going with open eyes, do the appropriate research, there's no doubt it can be one of the most rewarding chapters of your life. So I wish you all the best on this exciting journey. So would you ever consider retiring overseas? And if so, where would you go? Maybe you're already doing that and living the dream. Let me know in the comments, as I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. And as always, guys, if you found the video useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one, and bye for now.